My parents swore there'd be no grandkids at Christmas this year, not a single one. But when I arrived, my sister's 3 kids were running wild through the house. When I asked why, my parents looked me straight in the eye and said, "They're the exception." That's when I picked up my gifts and walked out. Stay with me, because what happened next changed the way I see my family forever. It was just a week before Christmas when my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. I expected something cheerful, maybe a picture of the tree or a reminder to bring dessert. Instead, the message was short and strange. "Hey sweetie, just letting you know we're keeping it small this year. No grandkids for Christmas, just the adults, please." I stared at the screen, sure I'd read it wrong. No grandkids? That had never happened before. Our Christmases had always been noisy, messy, and full of laughter. The kids running around the tree, the sound of wrapping paper tearing, Mom fussing in the kitchen, Dad pretending to be annoyed but smiling the whole time. It was what made the season feel alive. Without the kids, the house would feel empty, like someone had taken the heart out of the holiday. I typed back quickly, asking if something was wrong. Her reply came just as fast. "It's just too much this year. We want adult time, no chaos." It's what we decided. The finality in her words hit hard. I sat there, phone in hand, wondering why she was suddenly drawing this line. I wasn't the only one with kids. My sister had 3, and we'd always spent the day together, our children growing up side by side. It felt wrong for all of them to be excluded. I decided to call my sister. She picked up after a couple rings, her voice bright and cheerful. "Hey, ready for the holidays?" she asked, like nothing had changed. I hesitated. "Did you get Mom's text?" There was a pause, and then she said, "Yeah, I saw it. I don't know what that's about. Maybe they just want a quiet year." Something in her tone made me uneasy. She didn't sound upset at all, just casual, like this wasn't a big deal. I tried to joke about how strange it felt, but she brushed it off and said she'd still be going. "It's Mom and Dad, you know? I'll be there. I think it'll be fine." Her calmness made me second-guess myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe they really did just want one quiet holiday without the noise. But the thought of my kids missing out, of the stockings hanging by the fireplace without their names on them, left a lump in my throat. As the days crept closer to Christmas, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. My sister's easy acceptance nagged at me. The tradition we'd held onto for years had been broken with one short message, and I couldn't understand why. It felt like a rule had been made overnight, one that erased the joy my kids brought to the day. I told myself to let it go, but a part of me knew I wouldn't be able to until I saw for myself what was really going on. The days after that text moved painfully slow. Every morning, I'd wake up with this knot in my stomach, thinking about Christmas Eve and what it was going to be like this year. Normally, the week before the holiday was the best part, running last-minute errands, hiding gifts in closets, baking cookies that never seemed to last more than a day. But now, it felt like a clock was ticking towards something I didn't want to face. I kept replaying the situation in my head, weighing my options. I could just stay home and avoid the awkwardness. That would be the easiest thing to do. But then I imagined everyone gathered in the living room, my parents telling stories, the fire crackling, and me not being there. The thought made my chest ache. Every time I started leaning towards skipping it, something would pull me the other way. I'd picture the lights twinkling in the windows, the smell of Mom's roast filling the kitchen, and it would hit me. This was still my family. I had a right to be there. But then the other voice in my head would speak up, warning me about the look I might get when I walked in, about the silence that might hang in the air if I showed up after they'd told me not to bring my kids. I kept myself busy to avoid thinking about it too much. I wrapped gifts, telling myself I'd just drop them off on another day if I decided not to go. I cleaned the house, rearranging things that didn't need rearranging. I even baked a batch of sugar cookies with my kids, watching them cover the table in sprinkles, but my heart wasn't in it. At night, when the house was quiet, the questions came back stronger. Was I making this a bigger deal than it needed to be? Or was I right to feel hurt? If I stayed home, would that be giving them exactly what they wanted? And if I went, would I just be setting myself up for more disappointment? The closer it got to Christmas Eve, the more restless I became. It wasn't just about being left out, it was about the not knowing. I didn't know why my parents had made this rule. I didn't know what they were really thinking. And a part of me wondered if showing up might give me the answers I couldn't get over the phone. By the 23rd, I'd made up my mind at least 10 times, only to change it again. I'd look at the gifts I'd wrapped for my parents and my sister, and think about the effort I'd put into them. Leaving them to sit unopened in my living room felt wrong. That night, lying in bed, I tried to picture walking through their front door. Would it feel warm and welcoming, or would I sense the tension the second I stepped inside? The image shifted back and forth in my mind until I finally fell asleep. On the morning of Christmas Eve, I still didn't have a solid plan. My car keys were on the counter, my coat hanging by the door. I told myself I'd see how the day went, but deep down, I knew I was going. Not because I thought everything would be fine, but because I couldn't spend the night wondering what was happening without me. I needed to see for myself, even if it meant finding out something I didn't want to know. The sky was already dark when I pulled up to my parents' house, the snow on the front lawn glistening under the glow of the Christmas light. Their windows shone like something out of a postcard, and for a second, I felt a flicker of comfort. Maybe I'd been wrong to feel so uneasy. Maybe tonight would still feel like Christmas. I grabbed the bag of gifts from the passenger seat, took a deep breath, and walked up the shoveled path. The smell of pine and roasting meat hit me the second I opened the front door. Warmth spilled out, wrapping around me like a familiar blanket. I was ready to step inside, until I heard the unmistakable sound of little feet pounding across the hardwood. I froze. From the hallway, 3 small figures shot past, giggling so loudly they nearly drowned out the music playing from the living room. My sister's kids. All of them. The oldest had a tinsel garland tied around his shoulders like a cape. The middle one was chasing him with a candy cane in each hand, and the youngest had chocolate smeared across her cheek as she clutched a half-eaten cookie. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there in the open doorway, the cold air from outside curling around my ankles, my brain trying to catch up with what I was seeing. They weren't supposed to be here. No grandkids this year. That's what Mom had said. The sound of a wooden spoon clinking against a pot pulled my attention toward the kitchen. Mom was there, wearing her red holiday apron, humming as if the world outside her stove didn't exist. She glanced up when she noticed me standing there. "Oh, honey, you made it," she said warmly, wiping her hands on a towel before walking over. I stepped inside, still gripping the bag of gifts, my voice tight. "Mom, what's going on? I thought you said no grandkids this year." Her smile didn't falter. "Oh, it's okay," she said, almost lightly. "They're the exception." The words landed like a slap. "The exception?" I repeated, barely above a whisper. She waved her hand as if it were nothing. "You know, they've been so well behaved, and it just felt right to have them. Besides, it wouldn't be the same without at least a little bit of cheer." My grip on the bag tightened until I could feel the ribbon handles cutting into my palm. The cheer she was talking about was tearing through the house right now, laughing, yelling, and knocking ornaments off the tree, and none of it belonged to my kids. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. The living room erupted in another burst of noise as my niece squealed, and the sound made my chest tighten. I had come here hoping to feel like I was still part of the family. Instead, I was standing in the doorway, realizing I might not be. I barely had time to process my mother's words before I heard her voice. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." I turned, and there she was, my sister, gliding in from the dining room with a wine glass in hand, dressed in a sparkly sweater that caught the light from the tree. She had that too bright smile plastered across her face, the one that looked warm to anyone else, but somehow managed to feel like a challenge when it was aimed at me. She stepped closer, her heels clicking softly against the floor, and gave me a quick hug that felt more like a formality than a welcome. "You made it," she said again, her voice smooth, almost syrupy. "I wasn't sure you would." I forced a thin smile. "Why wouldn't I?" "Oh, you know, with everything going on," she replied casually, as if we both understood some private joke. Her eyes flicked toward her kids, who were now sprawled out in front of the fireplace, opening small gift bags from our parents. One of them shouted something about hot chocolate, and she laughed like it was the sweetest sound in the world. I stood there, trying not to let the heat rising in my chest show on my face. The scene in front of me didn't feel real. The decorations, the music, the smell of dinner in the oven. It was all exactly how Christmas at my parents' house had always been. The only difference was that my own children weren't part of it. "Let me take your coat," she said, reaching for it before I could respond. She draped it over the back of a chair in the hallway, her movements graceful but deliberate, like she wanted to make sure everyone saw how gracious she was being. Then she gestured toward the living room. "Come on, sit down. We were just talking about how nice it is this year without so much chaos." The way she said chaos made something twist in my stomach. She didn't need to explain what she meant. I could hear it in her tone, see it in the little curve at the corner of her mouth. It was a dig disguised as small talk. I stayed where I was for a moment, my eyes scanning the room. Dad was sitting in his recliner, laughing at something one of the kids said. Mom was stirring something in the kitchen again, humming to herself. My sister's children had taken over the entire rug in front of the tree, spreading toys and candy wrappers in their wake. And me? I was standing at the edge of it all, invisible. My sister caught me looking and tilted her head slightly, studying me the way you might watch someone about to break. "You should grab a drink," she said lightly. "It might help you relax." I wanted to snap back, to tell her exactly what I thought of her smug little performance, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I nodded and walked toward the kitchen, though I had no intention of pouring myself anything. I just needed to get out of the living room, away from her smile, away from the reminder that I didn't belong here the same way she did. From the corner of my eye, I saw her watching me as I left, her lips still curled into that perfect, polished grin. And maybe it was just my imagination, but it felt like she knew exactly how much it burned. I had made it halfway down the hall before I heard her footsteps behind me. "Hey," my sister called, her tone sharper now, stripped of that sugary layer she'd used in front of everyone else. "What's your problem?" I stopped and turned slowly. "My problem?" "Yeah," she said, planting a hand on her hip. "You've been walking around here like someone kicked your puppy. It's Christmas. Maybe try not to kill the mood." The words hit me like a spark on dry tinder. Kill the mood? You want to talk about killing the mood? My kids are sitting at home wondering why they weren't invited, while yours are in their ripping open gift bags. She rolled her eyes, letting out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, here we go. I knew this was coming." "This isn't a joke," I snapped, stepping closer. "Mom said no grandkids. That meant all of them. But somehow your 3 get a free pass? Explain that." "They're just—" She stopped herself, glancing toward the living room as if she was checking who might be listening. Then she lowered her voice. "It's different. They've been around here more. They help out. They behave." The last word landed heavy. My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Behave? Is that what this is about? You think my kids don't behave? You think they don't deserve to be here?" Her mouth tightened, and for the first time, she didn't have a ready comeback. That small pause was all it took for my anger to tip over the edge. "You knew about this, didn't you? You knew they were making an exception for you." Before she could respond, Mom appeared at the end of the hallway, drawn by the tension in our voices. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone calm but her eyes flicking between us like she was bracing for a storm. I turned to her. "You tell me, why are her kids here when mine aren't? You made a rule, Mom. You were crystal clear about it. No grandkids this year. Then I walk in and see 3 of them tearing through the house. Explain that to me." Her hands lifted in a soft, almost placating gesture. "Honey, please, this isn't the time." "No." I cut in, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. "It is the time. You made a choice. I just want to know why." She hesitated, glancing at my sister like she was searching for backup. "It's been a hard year. We thought it would be simpler this way. Less noise. Less stress. Less noise." I repeated, my voice breaking with disbelief. "There's plenty of noise in there right now." Mom sighed, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the conversation was too much to carry. "They've been around more lately. It just felt natural to have them." I stared at her, feeling the words sink in like cold water. Natural. As if my children didn't belong. My sister crossed her arms, her expression unreadable, but there was a faint glint in her eyes that made my stomach turn. I opened my mouth to push again, but Mom stepped forward, her voice quieter now. "Please, let's not do this tonight. I want us to enjoy the holiday." The urge to argue, to demand more than the half answers she was giving, pulsed hot in my chest. But I could feel the living room just a few feet away, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses, the weight of every ear ready to turn toward us. So I stayed silent, though the silence felt heavier than anything I could have said. I stood there in the hallway, my mother's eyes fixed on me, her hand still raised slightly, as if she could press the air flat between us. My sister lingered just a few steps behind her, sipping from her wine glass, that faint curve at her mouth betraying everything she wasn't saying aloud. No one moved to invite me further inside. No one asked me to stay. The hum of conversation from the living room carried on, untouched by what had just passed here in the narrow hall. I shifted the weight of the bag in my hand. The ribbon handles dug into my palm, a reminder of why I'd come in the first place. One by one, I set the wrapped boxes onto the side table near the door. They landed with the soft thump of paper against wood, but the sound seemed to echo in the stillness. My mother glanced at the gifts, then back at me, her expression carefully neutral. My sister's smirk deepened ever so slightly, like she was watching the last act of a play she already knew the ending to. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't explain myself. Words felt useless here, flimsy things that would only get twisted around. The cold hit me as soon as I stepped outside, the kind of sharp winter air that stings the inside of your nose and bites at your cheeks. My boots crunched over the thin layer of snow on the walkway. I could still see the warm yellow glow spilling from the windows, still hear the faint burst of laughter from inside. It felt like a completely different world, one I had just stepped out of for the last time. Halfway down the path, I slowed, turning my head slightly toward the house. From this angle, the lights looked perfect, the kind of scene people put on holiday cards. But now it felt staged, almost hollow, like a set piece in a play where I'd been written out. I kept walking, my breath leaving white clouds in the air. Each step away felt heavier than the last, as if I was dragging the weight of every Christmas before this one with the traditions, the dinners, the shared jokes. They didn't follow. They stayed behind those glowing windows with the people who had decided I no longer fit the script. By the time I reached my car, My hands were stiff from the cold. I slid inside, closing the door on the muffled sounds of the night. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, letting the silence settle. When I finally started the engine, the headlights lit up the snow in front of me. I pulled away slowly, watching the house shrink in the rearview mirror until it disappeared completely, leaving only the dark road ahead and the hum of the tires beneath me. I kicked off my boots and let them fall where they landed, the sharp clatter against the floor echoing in the empty space. The living room felt colder than it should have, but maybe it was just me, still carrying the chill from outside. I sank into the armchair, shoulders heavy, my coat still on because I couldn't summon the will to move. The silence didn't last long. My phone buzzed on the side table, the sound slicing through the quiet. Mom's name flashed across the screen. "Come back so we can talk." I stared at it without touching the phone. The words looked harmless enough, but I could hear the tone that would come with them, calm, coaxing, pretending the whole night hadn't happened the way it had. Another buzz. "I think we should clear this up. Clear this up." As though it were something spilled on the kitchen counter, easy to wipe away. I pressed my lips together, forcing down the heat crawling up my chest. The phone vibrated again, but this time a different name lit up. "My sister. You're taking this way too seriously." I let the screen fade to black, hoping she'd stop. She didn't. "It's Christmas. Drop it." The bluntness of it made my jaw ache. I could picture her leaning back in one of Mom's kitchen chairs, phone in one hand, that same sly curve to her mouth she'd had all evening. Another message, before I could even set the phone down. "Get over it." The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. Not because they surprised me, I'd half expected something like that, but because they were so casual, tossed out like she was telling me to shake off a bad mood, not the sting of being shut out. The phone lit up once more with Mom's name. "Don't let tonight ruin the holiday." I let out a breath that was almost a laugh, though there was nothing funny about it. None of these messages were about understanding, about acknowledging what had happened. They were instructions, all of them. Be quiet. Move on. Pretend. I set the phone down, but it was like it had a pulse of its own, glowing and buzzing every couple of minutes. "My sister again. You're acting like a kid." Then Mom. "We can talk about this later if you want." The words piled up in my head, heavy and unshakable. I scrolled back through them, reading each one twice, trying to find a crack of sincerity hidden between the lines. There was none. The clock on the wall ticked softly. The fridge hummed. Beyond the thin curtains, the night sat still and black. I thought about typing something, not a long explanation, just a short truth, but I could already hear how they'd twist it, so I didn't reply. I let the screen fade to dark again and folded my hands in my lap, the phone resting on my knee. The light from the street lamps bled in through the window, faint and cold, and I sat in it without moving, the weight of their words settling deeper, making the room feel smaller with every passing minute. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time before deciding who to call. Mom and my sister had gone silent for the past hour, but the weight of their words still pressed against my chest. Finally, I scrolled to Jess's name and hit dial. She picked up on the second ring. "You home?" "Yeah," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I wanted it to. There was a pause, like she was giving me room to explain. I didn't. Not right away. The words felt stuck somewhere between my throat and my stomach. "What happened?" she asked gently. I told her about walking into my parents' house, about seeing my sister's kids tearing through the living room, about Mom's easy explanation. I told her how my sister had looked at me, that faint satisfaction in her eyes. I didn't repeat their texts word for word, but Jess didn't need them to understand. She didn't speak for a moment after I finished. When she did, her tone had sharpened. "That's not about Christmas." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "They didn't just leave your kids out," she said. "They left you out. They decided you were less important. That's not a holiday thing. That's how they see you the rest of the year." Her words landed with a kind of clarity that made my stomach twist. I had been thinking about tonight like it was a single bad night, an ugly surprise that had come out of nowhere. But when she said it like that, I could see the smaller moments in the past that had felt off but that I'd brushed aside. "They've been doing this for years," she continued. "Different ways, same message. You let it slide because it's family, but that's exactly why they keep doing it." I leaned back into the armchair, pressing the phone to my ear. "So what am I supposed to do?" "Just cut them off. You set boundaries," she said firmly. "You decide what you'll tolerate and what you won't. And when they cross that line, you don't make excuses for them. If they want you in their lives, they can treat you like you matter." Her voice didn't waver, and I realized she wasn't just saying it to make me feel better. She believed it. "I don't even know if they'd notice," I said quietly. "Then that's your answer," she replied. We didn't talk much after that. She let the silence sit, not the heavy kind from earlier, but a stillness that felt steadying. When we finally said goodbye, my hands were warmer, even though I hadn't moved from the chair. After the call ended, I set the phone beside me and stared at it for a moment. Jess had named it, the thing I hadn't been willing to see. It wasn't about one night. It was about worth. And maybe for the first time in years, I was starting to see mine. I called the next morning, not because I expected anything to change, but because part of me still wanted to believe there was a way back. Mom answered on the third ring, her voice warm in the first second, then shifting to something careful when she realized it was me. I asked if she had a minute. She said she did, though it sounded like a formality, not an invitation. I just want to understand, I began, steady but cautious. Why was it okay for her kids to be there, but not mine? A short pause then. It was complicated. How? I pressed. Your sister had a rough year. I didn't want to make it harder for her. The words felt rehearsed, too neat to be spontaneous. And you thought that meant my kids couldn't come? You're making it sound worse than it was, she said quickly. It wasn't meant to hurt you. I let that sit for a moment. It did hurt me. Her sigh came through the line, long and thin. I think you're holding on to this too tightly. If we just move on. That's the thing, I interrupted. You always say move on. You never say, I'm sorry. Silence. Then, because sometimes you make things bigger than they need to be. The words were sharper now, stripped of the softness she'd started with. I recognized this tone, the one that shut down conversations, that left no space for anything but agreement. I'm not making it bigger, I said quietly. I'm telling you it mattered to me. I think you need to let it go, she replied, final and unyielding. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried a weight that told me the conversation was over, whether I wanted it to be or not. I realized she wasn't going to step toward me, not even halfway. I could keep talking, keep pushing, but the more I did, the more she would retreat into that careful, cold certainty. I tried one last time, softer this time. I want us to be okay. We are okay, she said. The words landed flat, without conviction. We said goodbye, the kind of goodbye where both people already know nothing has been fixed. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table, my coffee untouched and cooling. I thought about all the other times I'd felt this same invisible barrier. Times when I'd wanted her to hear me and instead got told I was overreacting or misunderstanding or making something into more than it. I'd never thought of it as a wall before, but now it was impossible not to see it. It wasn't built last night. It had been standing there for years, just disguised as misunderstandings and small slights I'd learned to swallow. This time, though, the disguise had slipped, and there it was, solid, unshakable, dividing us. I ran my fingers along the grain of the table that would cool under my hand, and knew that if the wall was going to move, it wouldn't be because she decided to take it down. It would be because I stopped pressing my hands against it, waiting for a door that would never open. The next invitations that came, birthdays, Sunday dinners, a spring barbecue, stayed unanswered. I didn't block numbers or send dramatic refusals. I just let the messages sit, blinking quietly on my phone until they disappeared under the weight of newer ones. There was no grand announcement, no speech about taking a stand. I simply stopped showing up. From my kitchen window, I'd sometimes see the family group photos posted online. Matching sweaters at Christmas. My sister's kids blowing out candles. Mom smiling in that way she does when she thinks everything looks perfect. To anyone scrolling by, it would seem the same as always. But I could see what was missing. Not my face, they could live without that. But the connection we once had, however flawed. They still had the gatherings, the food, the laughter. They just didn't have me willing to pretend everything was fine. The distance made things clearer. Without the noise of being in the same room, I noticed how rarely they reached out unless there was an event attached. How conversations, when they happened, skimmed the surface like a stone skipping water, never dipping deep enough to risk truth. I didn't try to correct it anymore. I didn't try to earn my place back, because the price had always been pretending I hadn't been hurt, and I wasn't willing to pay that again. When holidays rolled around, I made new traditions. My kids and I decorated cookies in the middle of the night, just because we felt like it. We ate dinner in pajamas and left dishes until morning. There were no rules about who could be there and who couldn't. Sometimes, I wondered if Mom or my sister noticed the gap at their table. If they felt it when they looked around and saw one chair always empty. Maybe they didn't. But I knew, whether they said it or not, they'd lost something. Not my attendance. Not even my approval. My trust. And that, once gone, wasn't coming back. Do you think I made the right choice by stepping back from my family? Or should I have given them another chance to make things right? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to hear your perspective. And if you want to hear more of my stories, don't forget to follow and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.